Welcome to the Unstoppable Freedom Podcast. I'm Jimmy Page. Well, today we have an opportunity to dig a bit deeper into the reality of political and ideological persecution and prosecution happening right here in America. Specifically, we're going to talk about the events of J6 and the aftermath, which has targeted and destroyed the lives and livelihoods of so many patriotic American citizens. Here we are, over 3 full years since the events at the Capitol building, and our government is still targeting, they're threatening, they're arresting, and they're prosecuting peaceful protesters from that day. They violated our constitutional rights, some being imprisoned without charges, denied due process, mistreated and abused, and have yet to receive a speedy trial. Now that the public has been exposed to much more of the video footage and we become more aware of the truth, it's become obvious that what actually happened that day is far different from the media and political narratives we've been told. Well, our guest today is a patriotic American citizen just like you and me. Her name is Rebecca Lavrenz. She's a God-loving mom, a grandmother, and a great-grandmother who loves this country, her family, and the things that are on God's heart. And she's been arrested, and she's facing prosecution for her peaceful participation in the J6 events. Today, she's going to share her story and the mission she's on to restore godly culture in America. Rebecca, welcome to the podcast.
Mark, thank you so much. I feel honored to be on this podcast. I really do. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jimmy.
Well, this is an important story, right? And I think that most Americans are in many ways unaware of what's going on surrounding the J6 events and specifically how people are being targeted for prosecution. And I know your story is one of those stories that everyone needs to hear. And it's at a turning point in some ways, I think, too. But before we get into what actually happened and how you got involved in the patriotic display at the Capitol, tell us a little bit about your family. Tell us a little bit about, you're a grandma, you're a great grandma. Tell us a little bit about your family.
Well, I have 4 awesome children. They're all patriots. A lot of people said they lost their family. They're all behind me, so I don't have any problem with that. I have 2 older sons. One was quite involved in the process of getting me to January 6th. And then the second one has always been very supportive. Wow. And then I have 2 daughters.
It's amazing.
One who gets me on these programs looking okay, but the other one helps promote me.
You've got a great support system for sure. And, have you always been this patriotic? What makes you so patriotic? What makes you love America like you do?
Well, I guess it's because I love my freedom. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's liberty, God says, and I do not take liberty for granted. And if someone tries to take it away from me, I get angry. And if people want to steal, one of my favorite verses that I've had for many, many years is John 10:10. The thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but Jesus came to give us life and life abundantly. And if somebody tries to infringe on that, I know it's the enemy trying to steal, and I do not like being stolen from.
I love that. And that's the biblical basis of freedom. In fact, freedom was God's idea. The enemy always wants to put us in bondage. He always wants to take away our freedoms and our liberties and he also wants to make sure that we don't live that abundant life, that we don't have an opportunity to be in a nation like America where we can fulfill our potential. So I think you were probably sensing that our freedoms were being infringed upon for many, many years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, they have been infringed upon. So I think the other thing that's always come to mind is my mission in life, and if you look at my website, which you're going to hear about later, is whatever's on God's heart. And you did mention that. Yeah. And my lifelong mission has been to know God and know his ways, not just, church ways or religious ways, but just to know what's on God's heart. So I made it a very focused importance in my life. My primary focus is actually to know God and spend time with him. And that takes time, just to being in his presence and listening and to hearing him. And one of my favorite quotes, and I'm not going to quote it exactly, was from Martin Luther in the early 1500s, where he said, if you're a Christian, but you're not fighting against the thing that the enemy is fighting against, then you're not really professing Christ.
Wow.
And that always made a difference to me. And because I believe the enemy is very, very strongly fighting against the foundations of this country that was founded by people that loved God and were separated unto him and wanted this country to be a godly nation. And when that's being infringed upon, I won't be quiet.
Yeah.
Because I'm very much a praying grandmother, great grandmother, but I've always believed that faith without works is dead. So if I'm not willing to put action behind what I believe, then I'm not really professing Christ. So
yeah, and a lot of people at your stage of life, you've lived a good life. You've got kids, you've got grandkids, you've got great grandkids. You have a home, and your life is kind of in a good place. A lot of people would say, "Hey, aren't you just retired doing nothing?" But I think for a believer who is trying to discern the heart of God, like you said, you're trying to do what God's asking you to do. And I love that. I don't care if you're 70 or 80 or 170. That should be the mission, right? There really is no retirement for a believer, is there?
No, exactly. And when I became a believer in my teens, I knew that my life wasn't my own. Yeah. Jesus said, if you want to follow me, you have to deny yourself, take up your cross and follow me. And I believe that cross is whatever your assignment is. And that cross might not be real comfortable, but someone just shared with me yesterday, God doesn't take the cross away, but he takes the burdens away. And so I've never felt a burdensome life. And I consider myself, if you're a believer at all, you know that you're here on assignment. You're a kingdom ambassador. Yeah. You're here on assignment. So we may be given 120 years, which I'm believing for, but after that, we have an eternity to share. And I want to live that forever because, and I'm sure my grandson and my son will probably say, well, you're not spending enough time with your great grandson. And I probably haven't, and I would love to spend more time with him, but I feel like this is an assignment that I have to be very focused and really hear what God is saying, because our country, and it grieves me, even when I think about it, it's like our country is in huge danger of being destroyed. I know God's faithful and we will arise from this situation, but it grieves me to know that people think that we don't have a godly country anymore and they're just giving up and sitting back on the sidelines. That's why this is my second podcast today. And like you said, I'm staying with a couple that are in their 80s. They were at the Capitol and they told me they would have gone into the Capitol. I just did a podcast with her above rubies and, lived life to the full. And there are many, many, many people that love our country.
Yes. Yeah.
And we just have to all wake up, not just us elderly people, but the younger generation.
Well, it's interesting you say that because you said you might be sacrificing some time with your grandkids, sometime with your great-grands. Maybe so, but they will never forget the fact that their grandmother, their great-grandmother, their mom is living with passion, doing exactly what God is asking her to do, and is really doing it for them. Because truthfully, you and I, we're a little bit older. This is really about our kids and our grandkids and those that are coming behind us, isn't it?
Exactly. And if you heard my story or anyone of before, when I was in the Capitol, when I was in that building for 10 minutes, the thing I saw was my three youngest children grandchildren at the time. They were like, I don't know, 7, 5, and 3 at the time. But all I could do is I could see them in my mind's eye. And I said, I will not let this country go down to Marxism or socialism on my watch. They're too important. And I don't want them to live the life that could possibly be if I didn't stand up. And not on my watch. I'll do whatever it takes. And if it means what it ended up being, then it means what it ended up being.
That's
but, God is a higher authority.
Yes.
Not what the ungodly government thinks they have authority in.
That's right. Well, and you have this sense, and I believe that for believers today, it's going to take incredible courage to stand up for righteousness, to stand up for God's standard, for the truth, because we've been given this great gift. And, America's taken a lot of heat from the leftists who want to tear us down. And they've demonized our founders, they've demonized our systems, all of that. And that's all done because they want to break it down. They don't love freedom, they hate God, and that's where we're moving. But it's going to take courage, isn't it, from people like you and me and others, and this new generation, which, by the way, I think this new generation is going to have a resurgence in faith and fearlessness, and they're going to need it, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If we don't, they're going to have to wake up. I was so excited. I was at a meeting last night where we were studying. The group I was with that I'm staying with, they were studying the the American Covenant. Kirk Cameron has a host with Patriot Academy, and I was amazed. There were like 3 times as many children as there were adults, and they were asked, and these were their parents and their children. It was, these are large family groups, but they were answering questions that I didn't know regarding our covenant. And I said, yes,
exactly. And I love that. And we need that, right? We need the education. And the funny thing is, the reason that we're together today on this podcast is because I saw you on Rick Green's podcast called The Tavern, which is on the Warrior Poet Society Network. And Rick and I have gotten to be friends because we were at a couple of events together. And so we're all this network of God-fearing, God-loving believers is coming together to wake up the lions, to wake up the church, so that we realize that, hey, this gift we've been given of freedom in America is at risk. It's in the crosshairs, and we need to do something about it.
Yes, exactly. And I'm not able to take up arms. They won't let me anyway now because of my January 6th arrest. I can't have any arms.
Hey, wait a minute.
I probably would.
Whoa, time out.
But it's a different war.
Is that true?
Oh, yes. I had to make sure that if I had any firearms on my property, I had to get rid of them. They took away my passport.
Unbelievable.
And they got it. Okay. Yeah. And if I go out of the state, I have to let my probation officer know.
Okay, so this is really good. I'm so glad you said that, because it sets us up for such a different conversation, because I didn't know that. So that's pretty enlightening. But I want to let's bring the audience into what happened leading up to January 6th with you, how you made that decision to go, who was instrumental in that. Let's talk a little bit about that, because then it will make the fact that you can't have firearms, which, by the way, is your first natural right to be able to defend yourself. There's no greater or more important right probably than that, other than speech. But let's talk a little bit about what led up to your deciding to go to the Capitol on January 6th.
Yes. Well, around the 1st of January of 21, I got a call from my son, and my oldest son, who is now grandfather, made me part of the great grandfather thing. He said, "Mom, have you thought about going to Stop the Steal rally?" Because he said, "I'm going to be going with my son. We're going to meet up with a few people there, and I think you really need to pray about it." He said, "I know you won't fly because they'll probably make you wear a mask, and you've never worn a mask." I won't wear it, as Rick Green says, one of those diapers, right? So I said, "Well, you're right on that." So I said, "But you could drive." And he said, "Mom, it's only 25 hours. And I know you like to drive anyway." So, and I do, I love adventure. So, in fact, I was reading back over my journal from at that time. And I remember writing, "God, I really want to go, but is that you? Or is that just me? How am I going to get to work? All the little details is only like 3 days away." But, I just felt like I prayed about it, and it didn't take me very long because I love truth so much. And I knew the election was stolen. So within a little bit, I knew God wanted me to go. And actually, when I was looking at my journal the other day, God had said to me, he said, "Rebecca, you want to live a long time, right? Well, if you go, you're going to have an adventure on this trip and it'll help you enjoy your life longer." And I thought, well, that sounds like God. So I said, I want to live a long time. So I'll take you up, God. So I decided to go. And then the day after I made that decision, I happened to look on my checking to see what my bank account balance was. And I saw there was a $600 stimulus. And I thought, oh, wow, that's from Trump. And he wants us to be there. I'm going to give my money back. That'll be my gas money. So I said, I'll give it back to him because I loved it. And I just knew that. And I decided I said, well, if I'm going, then my assignment is to fast and pray. So I started fasting a few days before I left. And then took off.
Yeah. It's amazing. So, you're obviously a praying person, and you're discerning what God is asking you to do. And you have a family that's encouraging you too, to live with passion and purpose.
Amen.
And so you begin this trek. This is 25 hours of travel to get from your home state, which is my home state of Colorado, right? And who did you go with? Who went with you?
Nobody. No. Well, I had one sister that was thinking of going with me, but she decided she wouldn't. And then my granddaughter really kind of wanted to, but then when I told my son, which was his daughter, and he said, well, if I go, I'm going to be very focused. I'm going to be praying. I'm going to be listening to, things that maybe she wouldn't always want to listen to. And then I don't know what the reason was. Maybe she just decided not to. So I felt it was better anyway that I went alone, because I could really focus on listening to God, praying, and just hearing what he had on his heart. and just enjoying being with God along the way. I wasn't alone. He was in the passenger seat. He always is.
That's right.
Right?
You're never alone.
No,
That's right.
no.
Well, what I love about that is, first of all, that's a long drive. That's a big commitment. I remember those days, and I was considering going. I was like, could I make this happen? Could I get there in time? And I wasn't thrilled about having to fly into the DC area for a number of reasons. I'm actually from the East Coast, so another element. But I was deciding, should I go? And for circumstantial reasons, I couldn't go. And then I watched things unfold. And then now, of course, we've seen 3 years of persecutions, 3 years of targeted political persecutions and prosecutions, extreme prosecutions. And I think part of and then we'll get into your trip to the Capitol. Part of what makes the prosecutions right now so maddening is that we watched the country for over a summer into the fall be burned to the ground, cities all over the country, property being destroyed, lives being taken, buildings, government buildings, including police stations all across the country being taken over by people with virtually zero consequences. We watched this happen. And now we have this event, which, by the way, now the evidence is out, was largely peaceful, in many ways invited by the police, the Capitol Police and others, definitely instigated by some within our own government. And now we're throwing everything at people who were there to peacefully protest. It's maddening, isn't it, that we're being treated differently than others who have done real damage to the country.
Right, exactly. And I think it's been going on a long time, hidden under the surface, obviously. And I think people are just allowing it to happen. And that's why to me, it's such a blatant thing. I'm thinking, like, how in the world can you not see what they're trying to destroy? They're trying to silence our voices, shut us up in an election that was so obvious. And I know I've been talking to a lot of people along the way, and it just amazes me too. I mean, it's hard to even fathom that people could even wear a mask to let their voices and their faces not be heard. I never in a million years thought that would happen in America, but then it did. Yes. Then you realize our country really is deceived, and we need to fight against that. And it's something like, I believe I'm not specifically the voice that gets all those kind of details out, because I think enough people are doing it, but somebody has to be targeted, in order for everybody to see how bad it is. You need to target people, and then those people who are targeted need to stand up and say, this is not okay. I don't care what it is. Yeah. You can't shut me up. It's just like, nobody's going to get President Trump no matter what, because he's not going to be bought. He's not going to be stopped. Well, I'm not going to be stopped either, because I count my life not my own. It isn't mine, and those that are persecuted in the Revelations, it says they count their lives as nothing. And that's what I do. You can do it. Shoot your best shot, right? I already know. I already got it secure, I mean,
you have a secure eternity. There's nothing, don't fear the person that can take your life. Fear the one that can send your soul to hell. And I think that, exactly. So you live with this confidence and this courage that people don't understand unless you believe in Christ,
Yeah, and that's the whole mission, because without him, we're going to lose it, because that's what our country is founded on. That's the covenant that it was founded on. And you can say what you want, that we have to just embrace every other ideology, but not in this country and not in this world, because God is still God of the universe. He will have his way, and he laughs. If we're not going to stand up for that, then you can arrest me the day of Christmas, whatever you want. It's not going to bother me, because that's what they tried to do. So,
so let's talk about that. Let's talk a little bit about your journey in Washington, D.C. So you get to D.C. Tell us a little bit about the night before and then heading into the Capitol and that journey.
Okay. Well, I got there I took 2 days. I left on the morning of the 4th, so 12 and a half hours each day. Got there in the evening on January 5th. And my son and his son, my grandson, and then met up with a couple other people, and they were there. They had flown in. So I met up with them at the plaza, or this place where there were some speeches going on, some freedom speeches. I don't remember this particular area. I think it was across from the Reagan building or something like that. But I went there, and then there for about an hour and a half. And then I went back to my daughter's house, room in her house. She had been working for the Republican National Committee at the time, and she had a house about 4 blocks away. So I went and stayed over there, went to bed, and got up. She wasn't there. She was in Florida that weekend. And so then I got up the next morning, all excited to be with lots of different patriots. And incidentally, I brought, of course, a white scarf and a red and white, red and white scarf and a white hat along with me, and didn't realize this till later. And it's kind of a significant little piece I like to share. But the hat that I had belonged to my daughter, Laura. And then my scarf that I wore, a red and white scarf, was a scarf that belonged to my favorite aunt, who since passed away. She was in her 90s when she passed away. And her name was also Laura. And I say that because if you know what the meaning of names, Laura means victorious one. And so I think that's significant because God was reminding me that I'm going in with victory, not from the attitude that I'm already a victor, because I'm going to get a reward in heaven for standing up for what's on God's heart. And so I felt like I was. And I think that's part of my message to the people that listen to your podcast and wherever I go, is that don't look at yourself as a victim. Yes, the government, it's the U.S. government against Rebecca Lavrenz, or the U.S. government against these people that are trying to, they're saying, breach the Capitol. No, we're repairing the breach that you created. And we have to stand up for that. And we need to come in with victory, not as a victim. And that's the way I look at it.
I totally agree. And you have purpose. When you have purpose, you can never really see yourself as a victim, because you know that God is going to turn all these circumstances around for the good of those who love him. So you have these assurances about your faith. So
and that's, it's like Daniel. I mean, they told him he couldn't pray. Well, I'm going to pray right in front of the window, so you can see me, because I have a right. The God of heaven wants to hear me. And he was thrown in the lion's den, but it turned out to his favor and God's.
Yes. And you're kind of in your own version of the lion's den a little bit right now. So let's talk about that. Your purpose of going to the Capitol was really to put your faith in action, for sure. But it was also to really bring his presence into the Capitol building itself. Now, did you expect to be on the front steps of the Capitol? Did you expect to be on the east side where you ended up? I mean, did you have a game plan, or how did that go?
No, I'm not really too planned out in a lot of things, because that sometimes gets me in trouble. But then that leaves us open, right? It leaves us open. Well, it's like a friend of mine says, what God says too, but it's a man or woman plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. And that's exactly what had happened. I went there because I wanted to pray. I thought I'd probably go to the Lips, but after I got there around 10. I told my daughter, I said, I was texting her, I said, I just don't feel like I'm supposed to go. What do you think I should do? She was watching my things over. She says, well, just listen to the Holy Spirit and do what he says. It's always a good answer, right? So I just stayed around there and just meeting all kinds of wonderful people that I might have watched on different podcasts and different things. There was a lady with a big ball gown. You may have seen her on some of the pictures, and she had different things, really cool things attached to her gown. And it was just really exciting. And then I was there for about an hour and a half, and then I just decided I'm just not going to go to the Lips. I won't walk over. There was a mile and a half back. And that wasn't just on what I wanted to do. I don't know if it was God or me, but I just landed. It was so amazing, Jimmy, that I landed right in the front of the barricades where those bike racks were. And I was facing the east. I was on the East Capitol, which is between the Supreme Court on the one side and then the doors. And then I was right in front of those barricades. And I thought, it was just such an awe in me that why would I be right in the front here? There must be a reason in front of those barricades. So I just was thinking, oh, this is kind of cool. What do you have me here for? I'll just keep praying and whatever under my breath, that kind of thing. And then after about an hour and a half of being there, I looked to the left, and there I saw a platform where people were worshiping God. I hadn't noticed it before, but they were singing. They were singing like different hymns and different songs, like the Spirit of the Lord and Be Upon Us, and different things. They're praying over the Capitol. They're facing the Capitol and just praying towards the Capitol. And I just thought to myself, well, I think I'm just going to go over there, walk over. There were some chairs over there, and maybe I could sit down for a while. I walked towards there, and just before I hit this grassy area where that platform was, all of a sudden the Spirit of God just fell on me. I don't know if any of you ever experienced that, but I've had that happen to me about half a dozen times in my life. And I just started crying, and it was just like so powerful. I could hardly stand up. So I sat down on the curb there, and I just wept and prayed for about 10 minutes, and then it lifted. And so then I walked over there. I stood and watched the lady that was singing for a while. And then this boldness of God came over me. I just said, I felt like I needed to go and see if I could pray on the platform. And they said, yes, you could. And what I felt like I needed to pray was the 1620 covenant, which says that it's a covenant that the Pilgrims made before they got off the Mayflower ship, and they all signed it. And they agreed that the land that they would set foot on would be a land that would give glory to God and advance the Christian faith. And so I just quoted that pretty much word for word. It's about all I prayed, and just prayed it over our country. And then that was it. And I felt led to leave then. And then I walked back to where I was and got the same place back. So that was about noon that I did that. And incidentally, I'm trying to find that recording of anybody who has found that, because I've been searching. I know the platform, but nobody has seemed to find like a phone video of me doing that. But I think it would be great for my defense. But if anybody has,
and I'm sure there's video of it, knowing how much video footage was taken of the Capitol that day that most of us haven't even seen, of course, unfortunately. But I find it amazing, because I would bet, so you were praying about the covenant, this original covenant from the original Pilgrims that came here on the Mayflower. They said, hey, this is for the glory of God and the advancement of the Christian faith. That is the underpinnings of this nation. And how many people do you think actually know that? I would say less than 5% of Americans even know that about our history, and how rich it is to know that was the original intent.
Right. And since then, there's even another one that's even before that. I'm not sure if you're aware of that.
Well, thanks for tuning into part 1 of a 2-part series with our great guest, Rebecca Lavrenz. Today, she has shared a little bit about her story about being persecuted for her peaceful participation in the J6 events. Stay tuned for part 2, where we get into more details. You won't want to miss it.